Hello everyone, I'm Joanna Najardi. Welcome to Fast Forward Podcast. This podcast is produced with the help of Relief Center and Fast Forward 2030 London. The aim of this podcast is to promote the United Nations global goals. We, Fast Forward 2030 Lebanon, aim to support the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals in Lebanon. Now, what are Sustainable Development Goals? They were a pact made in 2015 by the United Nations member states to achieve measurable goals by 2030 to better all human life, eliminate poverty, and protect our planet. On a side note, I'll be referring to Sustainable Development Goals as SDGs. Now, how will we disseminate those Sustainable Development Goals? This podcast is the first step of many endeavors to come, one of which is the competition that we're launching, Flash Forward, that you could know more about by tuning into our social media platforms. That is one of many initiatives to come to support our future entrepreneurs. Our guest today is Ghida Anani. Ghida is a social counselor and the founder of ABAAD, an organization dedicated to achieving Sustainable Development Goal 5 for gender equality. ABAAD provides shelter for gender-based violence victims along with counseling support for men and women to shift towards a culture of nonviolent communication, understanding, and cooperation. They also provide awareness campaigns against all forms of violence, especially among children. An important campaign they led was against child marriages. ABAAD is also active in putting forth laws and public policies that align with gender equality targets. Ghida, welcome to Fast Forward 2030 Lebanon.
Thank you. And just for as a correction, we did not lead
Okay.
on campaigning for raising the age against like the raising the age of marriage. Basically, we are part of the national coalition on this, but actually our main campaigning and advocacy effort is toward sexual violence and mostly toward it was for abolishing the Article 522, which is marrying your rapist and then escaping punishment. So this is more the sphere where we are more focusing on to complement what other feminist groups are actually working on. So the niche of ABAAD is advocacy for against all legislations that are reinforcing the sexual violence practice or reinforcing the stigma against the victim under the penal code. The Lebanese penal code.
Yes, because it's a shame that we still have this culture that accepts that a rapist would be accepted as a husband to a woman, and that she's the one who brings shame. That the fact that she is blamed for the crime.
Mm.
I mean, this is really. How do you deal with these ingrained prejudices?
Yeah.
These are very difficult to change. Is there do you feel that it's a process that could be done on a short-term basis, or it's something that will require time in order to change? It's because it's very much ingrained in a
Yeah, of
patriarchal
course.
culture.
Yeah, it's when it comes to patriarchy, it's definitely deeply rooted in the mentalities, and it's deeply rooted in even in reflected in our social norms and hence our policies and therefore in our legislations. When you want to talk about strategies for behavioral change and to influence social norms, usually it's a cumulative work where you have to tap on multiple level of the system that is producing the social norm and then shaping attitude and the behavior. And these come from education, gender socialization processes, and then the influence, of course, of media and all the socialization institutions like families, peers, school, educators, then partners, and so on and so forth. And this is quite cumulative and require multiple years. Unfortunately, in Lebanon, which is very similar to other MENA region, also countries, patriarchy is intersecting at the same time with very complex system of like environment that is where you have multiple let's say elements interacting together, but also intersecting and reinforcing that kind of mentality. You have patriarchy per se, but also you have the religious norms that are reflected sometimes, most of the time actually, in legislations that are regulating the relationship between citizens, but also regulating the relationships within the family. Then you add to it as well the economic system and the educational system per se. In some countries, like in Lebanon, you add to it as well corruption. And when we talk about corruption and lack of governance, it means like you have very much of loose ends in the general system that is not really providing a strong, solid protection environment that respect human rights and that respect equal citizenship and that respect rights and duties at the same time. So all this definitely require a lot of effort. Our work on the legislation is very minor. That's why we always say reforming legislations is very important, but they're not the sole solution, because you can change a text, but you cannot change then ipso facto the attitude. You have legislations against crimes, but it doesn't mean that crimes are not happening. Okay, just because this will require influencing perception, understanding a rule of law, and reinforcing the application of the law that create like a kind of more accountability environment. And this is where you have then commitment, and you have like understanding and being convinced of what is right and wrong. And this is quite a long-term objective to be achieved. And just going back to this victim blaming and the stigma, and even marrying the person who raped you, actually, this legislation per se, it did not by necessity push victims or push like to a solution to marry the same person that raped you. But being there, of course, these happens. Yani, these are happening in the country and in the different MENA region country as well, where you're pushed actually to marry the person who took out your virginity. Because losing virginity per se, meaning you're no longer a possible candidate for marriage because you need to be virgin. But having this text in the law by itself, presenting marriage as a possible solution to wash out something wrong that happened or washing out a crime,
Yes.
then multiple families and the society, like you have in the mentality, as if someone got raped, then marriage per se is the best solution as a remedial solution to what happened. And this is why we have the practice of like pushing girls into forced marriages by someone they don't want, being the rapist or someone else, as a solution for what happened, as if she's the one to be blamed. She's the one who did something wrong and she has to hide it, not being actually the one who is the victim of an unhuman, sometimes pervert, or even criminal, like it's a criminal behavior that occurred toward her. That's why we focused on this article specifically, to start unlocking and to start deconstructing a very deeply rooted social belief on solutions toward violence and exploitation and abusive behavior.
Yes, and blaming women for being the victims.
And so what if
blaming.
the victim is actually a man? So if a man got abused or raped, is he forced to marry the person who raped him? Being even if, like, you know, there's a multiple way of doing that, because I know there's always this argument biologically you can, okay, but using instruments, doing kind of terrorism against the person, doing a lot of things. There's a multiple way to force someone into unwanted sexual intercourse. Okay, so is in this case as well, do we do that as well? So when we talk about also legislations, they need to be gender equal, they need to be gender sensitive, and they need to take into account it needs to be applicable on everyone residing on a certain territory in a certain nation, which is not the case, unfortunately, in our countries.
Yes, and it's an injustice that brings forth more injustice. So having, forcing someone to marry, to forcefully marry or marry someone that raped them. I mean, it's unimaginable. It's really, you have laws that need to protect victims, but and at the same time you're emphasizing how important it is to create a culture that empathizes with rape victims,
Mm.
and really makes it a point that it's so important for them to be able to choose their lives and to
Indeed.
be able to just continue on after this trauma has occurred.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And which is like at the same time it can affect the mental health, it can affect the daily functioning, the ability to be reintegrating in a healthy way again in the society. It's about self perception, self image, which, and this is all like a kind of cost that is not taken into account when you're actually dealing with like you're granting justice to the survivor and the solutions to the violation she had to endure.
What has inspired you to dedicate your organization to fighting for women's rights and gender equality?
That is like I would say at the very beginning I embarked in the journey of activism against like to work on supporting survivors of violence, gender-based violence. It was just after my graduation. It was my first job actually to be like providing listening and counseling to women in the first Lebanese NGO actually working on this, which is the Lebanese Council to Resist Violence Against Women, LICORVA. And that is like where I started interacting and like really living the experiences, not only of these women, but to live the pain coming from the system. Myself, I wasn't like married then. I wouldn't say that I would identify and really feel what does it look like when you get locked in a relationship governed by a very discriminatory legislation. So the moment where you have misunderstanding or you have a conflict, you will start be a slave of a terrifying legislative system. And I started to feel like also how much these women are suffering, not only from the partner, but also how much they are stuck in the larger system. After that, I was lucky also to be part of a group, the group who established CAFA organization. I was one of the co-founders, very young back then. I was maybe almost 23. Yeah, I was 23 years old. And to live the experience of like, establishing an organization. We were very few. I was alone in multiple functions, have to do the counseling, to handle the hotline, but also to write proposals for fundraising, also to do training, awareness raising, really tap on multiple functions. That was like lucky in a sense of learning bits and pieces of everything, like how to write a proposal, to do its finances, sorry, but also to work on community level, organize campaigns, advocacy campaigns, media campaigns, work on the website, the branding, and so on and so forth. And also do the listening and counseling. From there, also from that room of working with the survivors, I was like all the time hearing the commentary of like, that we know that violence is not okay and it's harmful for our children, but you shouldn't talk to us, you need to talk to our husbands. So it was a kind of turning point. that okay, we are working on violence against women, we are healing the bruises of those who are experiencing it, but we're not solving the issue, or at least we are not working toward the solution of the issue, which is working on the person and with the person who is actually doing it. And from there, I started a program over there, which is like on engaging men and boys, and decided to start ABAAD as a model organization, more working on gender equality on the broader frame, because we need organizations like CAFA as a feminist, radical, really pointing straightforward to the problem, confronting, use the feminist approach of maybe confrontation, destroying and rebuilding the system, and that is quite needed. And these are like different feminist approaches, and start ABAAD more of like an organization that apply on itself and use as tactic more gender equal approaches in the way of addressing the problem. Meaning that we work on both sides of the equation. Men being like part of the problem, being the problem, they need to be the core of the solution, and they need to be part of the solution itself. So I took the challenge to start an organization by its composition, by its policies, by its programming, and the different strategic axes that we work on, really integrate and work on gender equality. Maybe we're among the only organizations in the country that actually have paternity leave, for instance. So we apply what we preach. So in sense, if we're calling on realization of gender equality, we are applying it in our internal policies. If we're asking for lifting reservations, let's say on CEDAW Convention, inclusively maternity leave, ABAAD follows in our regulations the global standard that we're calling upon. We follow the international treaties that we are asking Lebanon to apply. We have men, women in the composition of the staff, as well as in the volunteers and the diversification of the programs, the services. So which is not easy, you know, but ensuring integrity in living what we are asking stakeholders to apply and to live and to push it forward in the country, as well as using the public health approach and the systemic approach in the strategy of the organization. So yes, we provide services from one side for women, for men. We work with children, with parents, prevention, response. But also what we do is we complement that by generation of information, knowledge, and research and resources development. Then it's complemented by capacity building to frontliners working with the affected population. It's then complemented by working on social norms, campaigning, behavioral change campaigning, and then advocacy and lobbying. So we tap on the multiple layer of the system. It's the systemic approach, influencing the individual behavior and backward. And also we use the public health approach and the right-based approach in our interventions, and people-led approach as well as application of the motto or the values we are trying to promote. So if you talk about ensuring no woman is left behind, then meaning ensuring no woman is left behind. So women should be consulted, they should be on the table, they should be also part of the planning, of the execution, of the evaluation, and so on and so forth.
So you're saying that you engage even the victims, the people that you are serving. They're the people who are they're also part of. Yes. So they give you feedback. You build on their feedback in order to build to develop your organization.
Mm. They actually, for instance, in the campaign on 522, they were the one actually engaged in the defining the priority, but also they were the one participating in designing the campaign messaging. We consult with them on the issue, what we're gonna be working on. We talk with the survivors affected by this legislation, and then they were part of the production of the different campaign material, and then they were the one with us in front of the parliament and the different activation, those concerned. And that is like, you know, if you want to talk about people-led approaches.
From your experience, what is the biggest barrier in promoting gender equality?
I would say definitely social norms, mostly. It's the biggest, one of the biggest challenge in sense of like really achievement of that. And I would say as well, lack of accountability and governance in our countries. So the failure of accountable and strong good governance by itself, it can heavily affect the realization of the gender equality agenda.
At the moment, what is the most pressing law that is needed to protect women and children and that need to be addressed and implemented?
The most pressing, other than amending some articles in the personal status codes, the different personal status codes, I would say the right of women to pass their nationality to their children. Really, because it's heavily affecting even violation of some violation of child rights and their ability to fulfill their rights to education, the right to education, health, and even living their citizenship. Yeah, I would say other than we need to do the reform in amending multiple articles in various personal status codes that are regulating family spousal relationships. I would say definitely the law on passing the nationality.
What are the most efficient strategies that you used that you used collectively as organizations to be able to reinforce the implementation of laws that you're promoting?
I would say the most efficient is when you ensure that when it is people led, right holders led, and innovation. These two are have been demonstrated. If you actually actively and accountably engage the right holders themselves, it's really it's led by them, and also when you use innovation and positive psychology approaches, which is trying to mobilize the other as ally and neutralize opposition and not going into confrontational just because of the unique aspect of our context. You know, it's governed by this complex system that I explained. You cannot eliminate diversity in sense of the unique aspect of the mosaic of the country and its being diverse in sense of nationality, religiosity, confessionalism, gender and sexual identity, all of this. This is what make Lebanon unique. So you and you have to maneuver in this reality. This is the reality by the end of the day. So confronting, destroying, this is you're not in a state where it is uniform. You're calling upon one thing, you can do it. It's you have to adapt your strategies accordingly. So that's why That's why innovation and adapting is one of the aspects that is quite unique يعني quite unique in creating impact.
Like, for example, in cultivating empathy and the way that you um, you send out your message and in promoting empathy and sharing the experiences.
Yeah, it's promoting empathy, but also empowering at the same time. You have this thin line. You have to be real, you have to be genuine, but you have to be positive, calling upon the other to join the force, to actually be an ally, not condemning, not criticizing for the sake of criticizing, because it's easy to point the finger to the problem than finding and then working on the solution, I would say, because all of us can do it. We can definitely, we know what is the problem. We can all the time say, this is a problem, we need to do this, we need to do this, but actually we need to work on that. And that's where it should lay down the effort.
How much does integrating awareness in schools on gender equality versus gender discrimination can be in fact impactful in shifting our culture towards gender equality?
Definitely, it can be heavily impactful because you're establishing like the early education on these notions, which is very important. Revising the curricula, integrating this in the curricula, early education on notion of gender equality can definitely contribute largely to shape gender equal, gender sensitive citizens of tomorrow. And I would say definitely a big investment should be done there, but not only in the curriculum, but as I said, in the educational system. And when you talk about system, curricula is one aspect of it, but there is also the educational methodologies, the tools, the space, the staff, the human, the educators that are providing that, and so on and so forth.
You know, and specific details in, for example, conducting workshops together, doing practical work together.
Of course, it's part of the system. So it's about what do you reinforce and how the children would live the schooling experience, the educational schooling experience, okay, which is inclusive as well to it's inclusive to extracurricular activity, to the routine when they arrive in school, the things you do, the things that as an educator observer you would allow to happen between each other. So all of this, it's part of the when we talk about system, this is it.
What I love about your work is the counseling support that you provide is for men as well as for women, as an acknowledgement of them also being victims of a toxic masculine culture that is unconsciously inherent and that tolerates violent, hurtful behavior. So, what is, in your experience, men's role in achieving Sustainable Development Goal 5?
It's not about role. It's just about they are concerned. For me, when you talk about the development, like SDG 5, gender equality, it's about social roles. Social roles, it's everyone. It's being men, women, different groups, LGBT groups, and so on and so forth. So, so everyone is concerned. Everyone is affected. Everyone is concerned. So everyone should be as well targeted to be engaged. Okay. Unfortunately, there's sometimes a confusion on the level of understanding women's rights versus gender equality. So they think gender equality, it's about women's rights. No, it's different. It's just about, we're talking about social roles that are the result of the gender socialization process. Okay. Having said that, Meaning, so for us, if you are to promote gender equality, you need to work with everyone. And for us, it's inclusively men and women. Services, prevention, advocacy, men policymakers, men as legislators, men as religious leaders, anyone that can influence any kind of change on the level of the climate, on the level of يعني social norms by itself. For us, they should be engaged as possible allies and partners.
How much is poverty and gender-based violence interrelated?
Of course, they're interrelated in a way where, like, it's one of the what they call facilitating factors. Poverty, in sense of lack of resources, it can increase probability. It can be a trigger to violent behavior. It can reinforce an environment where women cannot escape an abusive relationship because of financial independency. And vice versa, by the way. Violence against women can reinforce poverty because of it's costly. Gender-based violence, it has a big cost on economy and on public health and on the government.
So it's a cause and an effect, yes.
Yes, it's a cause and an effect. Hence, it should be the work on ending poverty should be mainstreamed in all efforts being done and all interventions being done on ending violence against women.
How much do you believe that engaging everyday people, everyday ordinary citizens, in really caring for sustainable development goals can be a strong leverage point in finding efficient solutions?
Hala, it's very important not only in engaging them, in knowing about them, but I would say as a key non-negotiable approach in working on the different SDG, on the SDG agenda, generally speaking. So engaging the everyday, everyone, making everyone concerned, in my opinion, is this is where you start actually, because these objectives are the people's objective. It's for whom. So if you don't know them, if you're not educated about them, and then by the end of the day, you're not part of planning for its realization and then evaluating and then, how will it like even do any difference?
How do you envision Lebanon moving towards implementing sustainable development goals?
This is something that needs to be considered on the level of reforming multiple national strategies, because it shouldn't be dealt like Lebanon working on the goals. It needs to be goals mainstream, you know, and it's really should be reflected in all the national strategies, national action plans, prioritizing one maybe above another, like really even prioritizing even the allocations of national budget, where to invest more. But this is something to be done more on the level of rethinking and rebuilding multiple national policies first, and then multiple national strategies.
Ghida Anani, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. And thank you to all who inspire us to integrate sustainable development goals into our lives. From Fast Forward 2030 Lebanon, let us honor our natural and human heritages and create the best life conditions possible for future generations.
Trying.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're trying our best, actually.